This week on Brian Ross Investigates, the amazing story of the international fugitive who stole billions, befriended Hollywood stars, did business with Goldman Sachs, and set new standards for extravagant luxury.
He was probably the largest thief that's ever existed on this planet.
For Leonardo DiCaprio, he was a source of unlimited money for films, including The Wolf of Wall Street.
And he said, look, we can finance your next 4 films with Scorsese. And so they put the money in for The Wolf of Wall Street.
Now Jho Low is a wanted man, believed to be hiding and protected in China.
Do you think we'll see Jho Low in a U.S. courtroom at any point in the near future?
Absolutely not.
Plus, President Trump and the American intelligence community. Is the commander-in-chief demanding that Russian meddling in the election be kept from the American public? We're joined by Matt Olsen, a former top national security official in the Obama era, warning it's all becoming too political. And our winners and losers in the media. See if you agree with the editors of Mediaite and what they say about the bombshell reporting by Atlantic Magazine and its anonymous sources.
I don't think we've had a president who has contempt for American soldiers, wounded veterans, people who've been killed in action.
From the Law&Crime Trial Network, this is Brian Ross Investigates.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our viewers on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. I'm Brian Ross, joined as always by my colleague Rhonda Schwartz. And Rhonda, forget the bank robber Willie Sutton, forget Bernie Madoff. No one stole more money ever than the young man you are about to meet. He hobnobbed with Hollywood stars, he did business with Goldman Sachs, and he fooled and scammed a lot of supposedly smart people, Rhonda.
That's right. His name is Jho Low. And authorities say this young man began an international crime spree involving $4.5 billion, starting when he was in his 20s. Now he's an international fugitive, and there's an Interpol red notice out for his arrest.
There's a sensational book about him called The $1 Billion Whale by 2 Wall Street Journal reporters, Tom Wright and Bradley Hope. And I talked earlier of Tom Wright, who is based in Hong Kong. Tom, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Explain to us why Jho Low is considered a $1 billion whale, and how did he get away with fooling so many people, Goldman Sachs, prime ministers, banks around the world, Hollywood stars?
We called our book $1 Billion Whale because he was the largest, biggest nightclub whale that anyone had ever encountered. I mean, and this guy would go into a casino in Las Vegas and spend $3 million on a Wednesday night for no reason and drop $50,000 of chips on the floor and just lose them. So he was an incredible spender. What people didn't know about him, and this was Leonardo DiCaprio, who was his friend, Swizz Beatz, the music producer, Alicia Keys' husband, who was his friend. What they didn't know about him was all of his money was stolen, and he was probably the largest thief that's ever existed on this planet. I mean, he was a Malaysian who came from a pretty, rich family, but not extremely rich family. And it's an extremely complicated story, but he persuaded the Prime Minister of Malaysia, who was a family friend via her school friend, to allow him to run a sovereign wealth fund, which is obviously these funds that run billions of dollars in state wealth. And through that role, he was able to just filch billions of dollars out of the country and use it to build a Hollywood empire in the US. It's just an unbelievable story.
Why did Hollywood fall so hard for him and Leo DiCaprio?
So what Jho Low basically, when he first took this money, and this is back in 2009, he really wanted to get to know the Hollywood stars. He started with Paris Hilton. He very strangely thought that Paris Hilton was a good actor and had enjoyed her horror films, or horror film. So he paid for her to party with him, and he worked out that you could pay for a lot of stars to party with him. And so he knocked up against Leonardo DiCaprio, and Jho Low worked out that DiCaprio needed or wanted film financing. Because although DiCaprio is one of the planet's leading actors, he doesn't have, he has his own production company. He doesn't have the money to go and make a $100 million film. He still relies on the studios. So Jho Low came along, having stolen billions of dollars from Malaysia, And he said, look, we can finance your next 4 films with Scorsese. And so they put the money in for The Wolf of Wall Street.
Was all this? Absolutely not. We were making more money than we knew what to do with.
They made that film with them, and they were going to make The Irishman before all of this scandal blew out into the open.
What was the magic about him? Did he have some gift of gab? Did he have a great patter? What did he do to influence people and make them think he was, in fact, a billionaire?
The amazing thing about Jho Low is he's in some way a bit of a cipher. Everyone you talk to, what was he like? They said, well, he was very soft-spoken, Malaysian guy. He would pay for, there's a scene in Billion Dollar Whale where 20 playmates party with Jho Low and Leonardo DiCaprio in a suite in the Palazzo Hotel in Vegas. And you ask the playmates about him, and they say, well, he's just a quiet guy. He seemed a bit shy almost, even scared of women. And you don't get the sense that he was at all charismatic. But what he could do was change people's lives overnight with millions of dollars,
And how about Goldman Sachs? I get it with Hollywood, perhaps they were influenced by the money, but Goldman Sachs, these are canny people.
Well, they're very canny. They need to, well, they are canny. They need to make money, right? So again, this fraud happened in 2009. And obviously, the financial crisis is happening in the US, the aftermath of the financial crisis. The stock market is in the doldrums in the US. And Lloyd Blankfein, who was then the CEO of Goldman, he tells all of his partners, go and be Goldman in other places, meaning go around the world and find business. And this was great for a guy called Tim Leissner, who was a German partner of Goldman in Asia, because he was out here trying to do business. Now, Southeast Asia and East Asia, there's very bad regulation. Capital markets are very poorly regulated. There's a lot of corruption. And so to do big deals in this part of the world, it's very hard to do it and to do it straight. And so what happened was Leissner got very close to Jho Low. Now, Goldman, their compliance department realized Jho Low was a strange guy. If you Googled his name, he claimed to be from a billionaire family, but you couldn't find anything about his family. So Goldman Compliance said, look, don't open a private bank account for this guy. But Leissner kept on doing business with him. And eventually, Goldman raised $6 billion, I think $6.5 billion for the sovereign wealth fund that Jho Low ran. And Jho Low then stole half of it. Now, Goldman's senior management would say, well, we didn't know about that, even though there were many red flags about this deal, including why was a 20-something-year-old Malaysian running a sovereign wealth fund from behind the scenes. And what they say now is that Tim Leissner, this German partner, was a rogue banker, and that Tim Leissner has pleaded guilty in the US to helping steal $200 million of that money through his accounts. And his sentencing is yet to happen, so we'll still see. But Goldman has recently paid over $2 billion to the Malaysian government in fines related to this case. It still has to settle in the US. And the big question here is, will Goldman as a bank have to plead guilty at an institution level, which of course it never did after the global financial crisis?
Now, Jho Low is still on the run. He is thought to be in China. You're in Hong Kong. What do you know about his whereabouts?
Well, the last really good information we had on Jho Low's whereabouts, he was in Wuhan, of all places. And that's not just gossip. That's from Malaysian police have said that, and our sources have told us that is true as well. I think he had family there. But we don't have an exact location on him right now, but we're pretty certain that he is in China. Once this whole scandal came out in the open in 2015, the Malaysian Prime Minister, who was Jho Low's protector and also extremely corrupt and involved in this is one reason Jho Low got away with it. He told him, look, go to China, stay out of Malaysia. It's too dangerous for you here. And Jho Low went to China and continued to do what he had always done, which was to just do corrupt deals.
And what's the latest there on the money he's paid to one of the Trump campaign's fundraisers?
So after he was on the run in China and he's being sought by the US, Jho Low has been charged in the US criminally for money laundering and other offenses. He's been charged in Malaysia. There's Interpol red notices out for him. But there's no extradition treaty with China, so he's sitting there in China. He tried to influence the Department of Justice to get it to drop its investigation into this whole matter, which is ongoing. He settled with the US on a civil lawsuit, which was an attempt to get back, which is a successful attempt by the US to get back all the assets that he had bought with the stolen money, which include, Picasso paintings, an apartment in the Time Warner Center on Columbus Circle, mansions in LA, the film The Wolf of Wall Street, the proceeds from that, all of these things have been seized by the US government. But the criminal case against Jho Low goes on, and he's trying to get it dropped. And one way he tried to get it dropped, this is an astounding code to the story, was he paid this guy, Elliot Broidy, millions of dollars, or the family of Elliot Broidy, millions of dollars, to try to influence the Department of Justice to drop its case. Elliot Broidy in 2017 and 18 was the RNC deputy finance chair and a close associate of President Donald Trump. The Washington Post reported this week that he is close to being indicted in this matter. And I should say it wasn't successful. The Trump administration, as far as we know, is continuing to investigate.
So what's the next shoe to drop? They've seized most of his assets here in the U.S. And finally, do you think we'll see Jho Low in a U.S. courtroom at any point in the near future?
Absolutely not. I mean, the deteriorating relationship between China and the U.S. makes it impossible for the U.S. to get him back. I'm not even sure it's a very high priority for the Department of Justice to get Jho Low back. I think they probably have told Malaysia, look, you can try him because he's a Malaysian citizen. Malaysia also has an arrest warrant for him. Malaysia does want him back and does want to try him. But the question is, why would China allow him to leave and to go and face trial when he knows all about corruption in Chinese infrastructure deals? He's also a pretty effective pawn for China in negotiations with countries like the US and Malaysia. And so I don't expect him to see the inside of a courtroom anytime soon.
All right, Tom Wright, thank you so much. Great reporting, fantastic book. And I know you'll stay on the story. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
And Jho Low, for what it's worth, on his website says he's innocent of all the allegations. Coming up, the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. Why doesn't the president want us to know about it? When we come back, you're watching the Law and Crime Trial Network. This country's election is now 8 weeks away, and we know already the Russians are once again trying to meddle in the outcome as they did 4 years ago. Yet senior intelligence officials in the Trump administration are either trying to downplay the area or keep it hidden altogether. We're joined now by Matt Olsen, a former senior national security and intelligence official in the Obama administration, who now supports the candidacy of Joe Biden. Matt, thanks for being with us here tonight. Let me start by asking you, we've now learned in the last few weeks that the Office of National Intelligence will stop giving briefings to Congress about Russian meddling in the election, and that the Department of Homeland Security tried, at least according to ABC News, to bury a report detailing how the Russians were amplifying concerns about Joe Biden's health. Let me ask you, what's the implication of all the politics of that, and how in the first place do intelligence officials know what the Russians are doing?
Yeah, well, good to be with you, Brian. And first of all, these developments are really deeply concerning because what they are part of is a broader pattern that we've seen now, I think, for the past 3+ years of the politicization of intelligence, going back all the way to the way President Trump and the White House generally really disparaged the intelligence on Russian interference in the 2016 election. So we now have a repeat of that going into the 2020 election. And as you mentioned, you not only have the president saying or disregarding intelligence reporting, you have an unwillingness of intelligence leaders to brief Congress. So they're not going up to provide in-person briefings on the latest intelligence, and they've also not been willing to give the annual unclassified threat briefing. So this is part of a broader pattern that we've seen that, as I said, is really concerning because it goes directly to the heart of the role of intelligence, and that is to provide, speak truth to power. And it's really critical to our national security. Now, you asked about how the intelligence community may know about this. I'm not in the intelligence community anymore, so I don't have direct knowledge for sure, but I have enough understanding of how intelligence works. This is likely the result of a combination of different sources of information. There's the signals intelligence or communications that the National Security Agency collects by tapping into how leaders and others communicate, who are our foreign adversaries. But there's also the human side, the collection of information from individuals who are well placed and in a position to know. And what we know about the intelligence we've seen, at least the reporting we've seen about this latest intelligence, is that there's high confidence by the intelligence community, meaning that they think this information is reliable and that there is a strong foundation from credible sources to support the conclusions that the intelligence community is reaching about the nature of Russian intelligence in the upcoming election.
We saw a lot of meddling in the last election. What do you anticipate in the next 2 months, really, in the run-up to the election, from the Russian propaganda arm, that office in St. Petersburg, and from other efforts by the Russian government?
Look, I mean, as you said, we saw this in 2016. It was successful beyond the Kremlin's and Putin's wildest imagination in that election. So there's every reason to believe that that the reporting that we're seeing, the public reporting we're seeing, is true about Russian meddling in the upcoming election. And I can point to two examples. You mentioned one, Brian. The reports that were repressed at the Department of Homeland Security about Russian propaganda on the health of Vice President Biden. And then the other reporting, which is related to the reliability of mail-in voting. And here you have a particularly pernicious confluence of events. You have Russian propaganda saying that mail-in voting is not reliable and is subject to fraud. And then you have the Trump administration parroting the exact lines of this disinformation, all without any evidence, in fact, contrary to the experience we've had in this country with mail-in voting. So you actually have the administration of President Trump really amplifying what we know is a Russian disinformation campaign designed to sow doubt in the upcoming election. So this is a really approaching, I think, a crisis level in the United States that we need to get our arms around.
And finally, we just got a minute or so here. Don't all administrations play politics when it comes to intelligence?
You know, I just think that's a myth. I served in the intelligence community under both President Bush and President Obama as both a career person and as a political appointee in the Obama administration. There was a general consistency across both of those administrations that national security and intelligence was hands-off when it came to politics. When political discussions took place, they took place outside the Situation Room. In the Situation Room, when national security was being discussed in both the Bush administration and the Obama administration, there was no politics involved. And I think we've seen a clear break with that tradition, that norm, in the current administration.
All right. Matt Olsen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Fascinating insights.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
And we're back now with this week's winners and losers in the media, as chosen by the editors of Mediaite. And we're joined by Aidan McLaughlin, who's the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, which, like the Law and Crime Trial Network, is part of the Dan Abrams media empire. And Aidan, we start with your first winner, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of Atlantic and a darn good reporter who had the bombshell story about President Trump behind the scenes disparaging Americans who were killed in action or wounded in fighting wars overseas. Here's how Goldberg talked about it on CNN. Well, Aidan, we don't have that clip, but we know what he said, how the president called military members who were killed or wounded losers and suckers. Goldberg's reporting was criticized by some because it relied entirely on anonymous sources, but you still felt he was a winner.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a pretty remarkable report. I'd say it was the biggest story last week. It certainly, looks like the biggest story of the month so far. It dominated the news cycle, and you'll also notice that Jeffrey Goldberg, he's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. You rarely see his byline actually in the pages of the magazine, and so this was a really remarkable story. He got multiple sources to say that they have firsthand knowledge of President Donald Trump disparaging American war dead as losers, as suckers, and various other disparaging remarks. Now, yeah, critics of the press, and I'd say fans of President Donald Trump, sort of rallied around him and said, "This is nonsense. There's no way this can be true." And basically said, because these quotes are based on anonymous sources, you can basically dismiss the reporting. But here's the thing: most of the reporting during the Trump era has been done using anonymous sources. That's how reporting gets done. I saw Carl Bernstein over the weekend say that their reporting about Watergate could not have been accomplished without the use of anonymous sources. So I don't think anyone's under any illusion that Jeffrey Goldberg is not a top quality reporter, that The Atlantic doesn't have really high standards for fact checking. And I think it just goes to show the fact that all these other outlets, including Fox News, were able to confirm that these people that were in the room when Trump made these comments were making these allegations. I think shows that the reporting is solid. Now, there can be a question of whether or not sources are, conflicted, whether or not they have opinions about Trump that would lead them to make things up. But I think the fact that somebody like Jeffrey Goldberg is choosing to put them into a story as anonymous sources means that they are not just making things up, and that he actually has faith in them as sources, as do reporters at Fox News, at Washington Post, at the Associated Press, who also reported the same thing about what Trump said.
And Goldberg says more is coming. We've got about 15 seconds. Do you think that'll be powerful?
I don't think anything is going to change unless we hear some of these sources come out and actually say the things that they said off the, on background on the record. So I'm definitely looking out for that.
That's right. All right. Aidan McLaughlin, the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, thank you so much for joining us. A very interesting story, especially the outflow. It'll continue to reverberate this week. And thanks all
Brian.
of you for joining us here on Brian Ross Investigates. And thanks to our team at the Law&Crime Network for getting us on the air and getting us off the air.